PSG, who recently knocked Arsenal out of the competition to become Champions League winners for the second time in a row, hadn't won a single title until 2013. Yes, that's no joke. For a full 19 years, the club failed to win a single trophy. That's because, until 2008, PSG was just an ordinary, run-of-the-mill team. In 2008, Qatari investors were set to change everything, and the club would reach an incredible scale. I'll tell you all the facts that will surprise you shortly, but first, let's go back to the 2002 World Cup final, the Argentina vs France match with Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe facing off. The shocking fact is that 6 goals were scored in this final, and all 6 were scored by PSG players. These events were perhaps the world's finest PR spectacle. 8 billion people watched this moment, and they all saw that PSG, this small Parisian club backed by Qatar, had won the World Cup with its own players. In third place is the long-standing misfortune of the reigning Champions League champions. To date, PSG has spent billions of euros trying to win the Champions League, yet every manager, player and executive they've sacked has gone on to lift Europe's biggest trophy elsewhere. Here are some examples. Thomas Tuchel was sacked after losing the 2020 Champions League final with PSG, only to win the title with Chelsea a year later. Similarly, Kingsley Coman played in the PSG youth system for years, but was deemed inadequate and sent away. Yet, it was Kingsley Coman who scored the goal that knocked PSG out of the final in 2020 and went on to win the trophy. Another name is Thiago Silva, whose contract was not renewed due to club's strategic decisions. He too won the Champions League just 1 year after leaving. However, Mbappe, who left PSG 2 years ago, has still not won a trophy. Do you think the problem lies with Mbappe? Let us know your opinion. Now, you'll be very surprised by this fact. During his time in Paris, Ronaldinho had a very active social life outside of football, often seen enjoying the city's vibrant scene. Ronaldinho only trained once a week. When Saturday matchday came around, Ronaldinho would play in the match, and when he did, he was the master of the pitch. The PSG manager at the time, Luis Enrique, was so fed up with him that he'd often send him to the substitutes bench as a punishment, but it never worked because he'd etched his name into the fans' hearts and no one was above him. His teammate Jerome Leroy confessed in a documentary years later, Ronaldinho never turned up for training on any weekday. He'd only come on Fridays, join the tactical session on Saturday morning, and then play in the match. No one knew where he was on Wednesdays. PSG tried to do the same with Mbappe, but it didn't work out. Because in the summer of 2022, Real Madrid wanted to sign Mbappe, but PSG made him sign a contract to keep him. Yet this contract was the most extreme example in history of how far a football club could bend to a player's will. Even though Mbappe didn't want to, he stayed at the club and pocketed a €60 million loyalty bonus. But 2 years later, he would be heading to Real Madrid on a free transfer anyway. Do you think PSG was poorly managed back then? Because the same man had done something else that would land Mbappe on this list again. In the summer of 2017, following the mind-boggling Neymar transfer, it was Mbappe's turn. But due to UEFA financial fair play rules, PSG were forced to loan him out. They added a mandatory buyback clause to the deal, but that clause was quite absurd. The contract stipulated that PSG, not being relegated from League One that season, was sufficient to trigger the mandatory purchase of Mbappe. In 7th place are Mbappe and Neymar, 2 of the former architects of PSG's billion-euro project. In 2023, before a Champions League match, Mbappe addressed the team as a young yet authoritative leader, saying, "For the return leg, everyone needs to get a good night's sleep, eat well and stay healthy." However, the surprising part was that some players didn't listen. Because hours passed after this incident, and as night fell, videos began to leak on social media. Neymar had gone to a McDonald's branch with friends at a venue in Paris, eating a burger at midnight. Perhaps if Neymar hadn't engaged in such undisciplined behaviour, his career might be in a very different place right now. Another little-known fact is Le Classique. For those unfamiliar, Le Classique is referred to as the Marseille versus PSG derby, but this doesn't really reflect the truth, because until the early 1990s, Marseille's rival was Bordeaux, and PSG wasn't a well-established club back then. Nobody paid it any mind. In 1991, Marseille's president thought that, just like in other countries, France needed such a rivalry, so they sat down at the Masada and devised a plan. Thus, they created a competitive atmosphere, as if these two sides had been facing off for years, and Le Classique, which has endured to this day, emerged. Number 9 brings us to Messi. In the summer of 2021, Lionel Messi was leaving Barcelona, and his next destination was Paris. However, this transfer was also a revolution in terms of financial technology, and most people didn't even notice. PSG announced that it would pay a significant portion of the astronomical signing fee, around 25–30 million euros, owed to Messi not in cash but in cryptocurrency. The club's official cryptocurrency is the $PSG fan token. This marked the first time in the history of world football that cryptocurrency had been used on such a large scale in the transfer of an elite-level superstar. In 10th place is David Beckham, who joined PSG to complete the final stages of his career. Although he stayed for just 5 months, he won the hearts of Paris Saint-Germain fans. This is because Beckham donated his entire salary for those 5 months to a children's hospital. A player turning down his salary is almost unheard of in football history. But Beckham, a major cultural icon in England and someone who works with charities, became a symbol during this 5-month period. Meanwhile, the next video contains an important piece of information about Beckham. Don't miss it. Another surprising fact comes from Zlatan. In 2016, Zlatan Ibrahimovic wanted to leave PSG, but the board scrambled to keep him. Zlatan, however, laid down his condition transparently. "I'll stay if they erect a statue of me in place of the Eiffel Tower." The idea was to replace the Eiffel Tower, one of France's historical landmarks, with a statue of Zlatan. If you were the PSG president, what would you say to that? Paris didn't take it as a joke. The Eiffel Tower's official account replied, "I love Zlatan, but the tower is mine." When they didn't erect the statue, Zlatan left. And as he left, he said, "There was no history here before I arrived. I created this club." Who do you think is right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In 12th place, there's a comical incident. PSG travelled to Germany, where RB Leipzig are based, to play a decisive Champions League match. They checked into the hotel, trained, and prepared. The day before the match, they experienced one of the most absurd crises in the club's history and one of the most viral moments on the internet. Around 10 players got into the hotel lift. Layvin Kurzawa, Marco Verratti, Marquinhos, Presnel Kimpembe, Angel Di Maria, and others. As the lift was overloaded, it stopped working, and the 10 players were left stuck inside. These players made up almost half of PSG's starting 11. At that moment, Layvin Kurzawa took out his phone and live-streamed the inside of the lift on Instagram. German firefighters then arrived, opened the lift, and the players got out. Now there's another legend, Verratti. In the summer of 2017, Marco Verratti informed the club that he wanted to move to Barcelona. He wanted to leave so badly that he was even imagining his new home in Barcelona. But PSG president Nasser Al-Khelaifi reacted and rejected the sale. Verratti even made a statement to the press. They then officially locked him in a golden cage by increasing his salary. Because Verratti was one of the club's most important players, and selling him seemed impossible. In 14th place is PSG's commercial acumen. During the years of failure in France, an alternative route was opened up, and that was Japan. The marketing strategy was simple. Take the players to Japan, organize a tournament there, sell merchandise there, build a fan base there. And this proved truly successful. Through its summer tours in Japan alone, PSG generated millions of dollars in merchandise sales. As PSG struggles at its core in France, it thrives on the periphery in Asia. Step back from the football lens and look through the business lens. PSG has struck a brilliant balance between core failure and peripheral success. Another fact about this shrewd president is that he was originally a professional tennis player. He once ranked 995th in the ATP World Rankings. In 1996, he played a match against Roger Federer and lost 6-2, 6-1. But the real story is that the person to whom Al Khalifi owes his billions and his presidency of PSG is the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The two became close friends whilst playing for the Qatar national tennis team. So PSG's entire destiny was written out on a tennis court years ago. One of the strangest connections in football history, a tennis player who beat Federer goes on to run football's biggest club and spend billions. In 16th place is Thiago Silva, who was heartbroken after the 2020 Bayern final. He had done a lot of work in Paris over the past 9 years, but 3 days after that final, his phone rang and the PSG sporting director told Thiago Silva, "You're 35, you're getting on a bit, your contract won't be renewed." Although Silva was upset, he agreed and signed a contract with Chelsea in England, and subsequently, PSG won the Champions League, a title they hadn't managed to secure for years. At the age of 35, the man who was written off as too old was still playing in Europe's top league and lifting trophies. In 17th place is women's football. Lyon had dominated women's football for 20 years, no one could beat them. But then PSG came along and put a stop to that. PSG systematically signed the best female players in world football, and Lyon's 2-0-year reign was taken over by PSG in just 5 to 6 years. By the way, do you know where PSG's Mustang kit comes from? It wasn't inspired by French fashion, but by American muscle cars. In 1973, fashion designer Daniel Hector was inspired by the twin stripes on a Ford Mustang he saw on the street and adapted that exact design for the kit. Another fact is that in 2010, a dispute arose between two different PSG fan groups, Boulogne and Auteuil, leading to some disruptive situations. Subsequently, another decision was made to cancel all matches. The stands fell silent like a theatre hall. But when Qatar bought PSG, this clean stadium was exactly what they wanted. They marketed the hooligan-free stadium to wealthy tourists and Hollywood stars, turning it into a socialite's playground. Finally, there is PSG's history, which appears grand but is not what it seems. PSG is not a century-old club like Real Madrid or Barcelona. It is a project club founded in 1970. It was meant to be Paris's elite team, so Paris FC and Stade Saint-Germain were merged. 2 years later, a split occurred due to differences of opinion. Paris FC remained in the top flight, whilst PSG were relegated to the French 3rd division. So, the PSG we know today as a giant club actually started out in the amateur leagues. The video has ended. See you in the next one.